Welcome back to Change Machine Labs. Before we get started, I'd like to make a couple shout outs. First, to Front Street Provisioners for hosting the recent Art Bazaar, and second, to all the people that came to check us out at both the Art Bazaar and our various online betas. After our Intro to Digital Art beta, we made our resources from the class available, and it has been amazing to see what people have come up with. I have a favorite, and I have to share it again. With millions of impressions and almost 500,000 shares, someone turned my quick lesson in silhouette and character design into a viral meme. They even added a couple silhouettes to the lesson. Teacher winning! Our new format is separating the classes from the video production and running this a little more like a classic video series. Please leave your feedback in the comments below and tell us what you think about it. This month we're going to be focusing on open source music and audio production. One of the difficulties new streamers tend to run into is looking for free music. While there are a lot of libraries out there with free music, most of them come with a lot of restrictions, so be careful when choosing your background music, especially if your video is going to be shown on multiple platforms, for example, Facebook and YouTube. We weren't completely happy with what we could find, so we decided to start recording our own and use it as an opportunity to teach some of the tools we have here in the lab. We'll be streaming our music on SoundCloud. Patrons will have access to our MP3s and will be able to use them in any free online video. And as always, members will have full access to our source files. Check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/changemachinelabs for more information. So let's dig in. There are two key components of every song, the key and the beat. We're going to be starting with the beat. We'll use Hydrogen Drum Machine, which is an open source programmable drum machine. Hydrogen Drum Machine is available at hydrogen-music.org. This is what you get when you first open Hydrogen. So let's go over the layout of the UI to make this a little easier. Here, underneath the file menu is your global tools, where you have your player, your beats per minute, which we'll get to in just a minute, and some of your other UI elements. This makes your mixer visible, which is inevitably hidden on another monitor. And this is your instrument rack, which would control the sounds of individual instruments. You can click over here on a specific instrument and hear not only what it's sounding like, but you can see over here the UI is actually changing. So if you want to change things, click on the instrument you want and then change the specific sound. Before we get back to the beats per minute, there's two things we need to do. One, we need to put a very basic beat here. So I'm just going to put a kick drum on the 1 and 3 of this measure, and I'm going to actually move this rock snare up to the second position. You can just click and drag instruments and put that on the second and fourth beat. Now that we have a beat, the other thing we need to check, up here in the player that you have pattern selected, which will allow the pattern to loop. Now that that pattern is looping, we can start playing around with the beats per minute. So we can double click up here, and let's start with something really low. So this is 80 beats per minute. And anything lower than this, I would kind of equate to just chilling or relaxing, very soothing music. The rest of these, I'm going to actually use the analogy of running, so people can kind of associate the speed, because the beats per minute actually directly correlates to pace or turnover when you're turning your legs. So the next one I want to go up to is 120 beats per minute. And this would be more like a warm-up or cool-down. You're starting to get excited, the beat is starting to get there. It's that building action, I would say. Not really a run, not really jogging yet, but you know you're getting somewhere. But once you get up to about 135, this starts being more of a jogging rhythm, if you're imagining running with the beat. Let's crank this up a little higher and get to where I think running would be, which would be about 150 beats per minute. And then, if we're really wanting to get intense, imagine, a sprinter or hurdler running through this scene. Probably about 170 beats per minute, where it starts being almost a little uncomfortably fast. We're going to be looking for a fast song, but it's probably not going to be that fast. So let's go for something around, let's hear 160 beats per minute. Maybe a little lower than that. Let's go 150. Once we get to this point, it's It's really just writing a few different variants to these and play around with it. Try figuring out what beats and things you like to hear and try to imagine a melody. Try to imagine the space needed to put the other instruments in when you get to there. So take a bit of time and create several different patterns. You can just click on the pattern name and change it. You can right click properties if you want to edit the name and actually give them fancy names. And then once we get that, we'll start putting a song together. While I'm working on these beats, one thing I want to point out is dynamics. If you look at some of the dots on this beat, you'll see some of them are black and other ones are various shades of gray. If we click on that instrument, you can see down here at the bottom, we have a volume panel. For every beat, you can change the volume of that specific tone. I just want to point this out because some things like cymbals or snares can have a really sharp sound that you want to be able to dial back and pull back into the rest of the rhythm. Now that we have a few beats, I want to get into the sequence editor. This is where you're going to build your song and be able to string these beats together, but there's one other thing I want to illustrate quickly. So let's first go through and just listen to the beats. So I'm going with a little faster beat, and I wanted to have 3 different variants of it. 2 that were a little faster, and then 1 that was a very kind of slow rhythmic beat to it. The other thing on here is, right now you can tell I'm still listening to the pattern. Let's take this to the song, is I wanted to be able to have that beat change where it had a bit of movement. So I added a transition or a fill, which is just another pattern that we're going to overlay and alternate if it's playing or not in this case. But this is something that we're going to expand a little further, so I just wanted to point it out now. If you want to set up the song, let's just go to the song and listen to it. You can see it's trying to play very linearly and just go through all the patterns. I could have, in this case, instead of having this be an extra pattern that I was adding on, increased the size of the pattern. Well, I can't do that while it's playing, but it would make the entire pattern twice as long, and I'm usually avoiding doing that, but the main reason is it changes how things play versus what you see in the sequence editor, and I like having that parity between the two. There are 2 ways to edit your song in the sequence editor. The first of which is selecting the brush tool, which will allow you to paint on which patterns you want to play in the sequence. So you can play a single sequence, or if you want to overlap, it's just painting 2 different patterns to play at the same time. The other way to edit your song is to use the selection tool, which will allow you to select big chunks of your song and move them around. That includes being able to switch which patterns they're playing on. The other thing that tool allows you to do is select everything and hold your control key, and you can duplicate that pattern, which makes it a lot easier to set up things like your verses and choruses, where you might have a very specific pattern repeating. If the song you're trying to record has a swing rhythm, you can adjust that in the mixer under Humanize. So I spent a little bit of time and painted my beats into a song. There's a few things I want to go over before I wrap this up, and they're just little ways to add a little bit more of a human feel to your drum machine. One way is to literally go in and add the beats and fills, even some of the subtle beats and variants that will give some of the human quality back to the rhythm. The other big way to do that is to go into the mixer and add some humanized features, which would be like velocity or timing, which adds a little bit of a random factor. I'm not adding it to the timing in my case, but in the velocity, I'm adding a little bit of humanization for how hard the drums are being hit. Once you're finished creating your drum beat, the next step is to export it, and then we're going to take it into Audacity and record the rest of our instruments. So to do that, we go up to Project, Export Song, and all of these settings are going to be correct for what we're doing. We're going to be using a lossless wave file at 44.1 kilohertz, and then we can just export our song. Extra kick drum. So now we're ready to move on to Audacity, so catch me in part 2. Peace.